She had always loved the feeling of freedom. Even when she was a little girl lying in the grass outside her home, she imagined herself running fast, feeling the wind on her face, and never being held back by anything. But life had a way of changing plans. One accident, one moment, and everything she had known about herself changed. She woke up in a hospital bed one day, unable to move her legs. The doctors told her that her spinal cord had been badly injured, and while her arms and upper body were fine, her lower body would never work the same way again. At first, it was a shock she couldn't understand. She cried herself to sleep many nights, holding on to the dream she thought she would lose. She watched other kids run, play, and jump, and she longed to do what they did, but her body did not obey. Friends came to visit her, trying to cheer her up, but sometimes their words, even when meant kindly, made her feel more distant. They would say things like, "You'll get used to it," or, "There are other ways to have fun." But what she wanted was not to just get used to it. She wanted her life back, the life she had imagined for herself. Her parents were always there, trying their best to help her find strength. They hired therapists, bought equipment, and adapted their home so she could move as freely as possible. They encouraged her to focus on what she could do, rather than what she could not. Slowly, she learned to use a wheelchair with skill, maneuvering it almost like a dance around the house. But even as she learned to adapt, there was one dream she refused to give up. She wanted to ride a horse. She had loved horses ever since she could remember. There was something about their power, their gentleness, and their sheer presence that spoke to her soul. Before her accident, she had visited stables with friends, watching the horses gallop across fields and imagining herself on their backs, feeling unstoppable. After the accident, that dream had seemed impossible. How could she ride a horse if she could not even feel her legs? How could she control a creature so big, so strong, if she could not balance on her own body? Yet the desire never left her. It burned quietly in her heart, growing stronger as the years passed. She began researching ways that people with disabilities could ride. She learned about adaptive saddles, harnesses, and special training techniques. She watched videos of people like her, riding horses with determination and skill. Each time she saw someone succeed, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do it too. Her parents were cautious. They wanted to protect her from disappointment, but they also wanted to honor her determination. After months of discussion, they agreed to let her try. They found a small equestrian center not far from their home that specialized in therapeutic riding. The center had experience with riders with disabilities, and they promised to help her every step of the way. The first time she arrived at the stables, she was nervous. The smell of hay, the sound of hooves, and the soft nickering of the horses brought a mix of excitement and fear. She was wheeled down the path toward the paddocks, and her eyes widened at the sight of the horses. Some were calm and gentle, while others tossed their heads and pawed at the ground, full of energy. She could feel her heart beating faster, a mix of joy and anticipation. Her instructor, a kind woman with years of experience, greeted her warmly. She explained how the lessons would work, how they would help her get onto a horse safely, and how she would learn to communicate with the animal using her arms, her posture, and even subtle movements of her head and shoulders. She promised that they would start slowly, with small steps, and that the most important thing was building trust between the rider and the horse. On her first attempt, she met a gentle horse named Clover. Clover was calm and used to beginners, and he lowered his head as if welcoming her. With the help of a mounting platform and her instructor's careful guidance, she slowly lifted herself into the saddle. For the first few moments, she held on tightly, unsure if she could balance herself. Her heart raced, but she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. The first ride was slow. Clover walked in a circle while she learned to hold the reins and shift her weight to guide him. At first it felt awkward. Her arms ached from gripping too tightly and her hands shook, but Clover responded to her movements, following her guidance carefully. Each step, each tiny success made her smile a little more. For the first time since her accident, she felt a sense of freedom returning to her. She was not running, not walking, but she was moving in a way that mattered deeply to her. As the weeks passed, her skills improved. She learned to signal Clover with gentle pressure of her hands, a slight lean forward or back, and even small shifts of her shoulders. She discovered that riding a horse was not just about physical movement, it was about communication, trust, and connection. She felt a bond with Clover that she had never felt with anyone else. Clover listened, Clover understood, and Clover accepted her completely. That bond gave her courage she did not know she had, but her heart wanted more. Clover was gentle and safe, but he was not wild. She dreamed of riding a horse with spirit, strength, and fire, a horse that could match her courage with its own. She knew it would not be easy. No one had ever successfully ridden the wild stallion that lived at the far end of the stables. He had thrown every rider who tried to tame him, and his reputation filled the entire town. But the girl could not stop thinking about him. She felt a strange connection, almost as if he was waiting for someone like her, someone who would not try to force him, someone who would see him as he truly was. Her parents hesitated when she mentioned the wild stallion. They had seen the horse in action and knew how dangerous he could be. But the girl's determination was clear. She promised she would not try to control him with force, that she would go slowly, that she would listen and wait until he trusted her. After long discussions, her parents reluctantly agreed to let her meet him under strict supervision. The day she first saw him, she was wheeled toward his paddock with her heart pounding. The stallion stood at the far corner, his coat shining in the sun and his muscles moving under his skin with raw power. He tossed his head and pawed at the ground, his dark eyes full of spirit. She felt a shiver of fear and excitement. The other horses had never moved her like this, but something about him drew her in. She could sense his energy, his independence, and she felt an unexpected calm in her heart. She knew he would be a challenge, but she also knew that challenges were part of her life now. She had overcome more than most people could imagine, and she was not going to stop now. Over the next few weeks, she spent time with the stallion every day. She did not try to ride him at first. Instead, she talked to him, fed him, and learned his movements. She walked alongside him in the paddock, letting him sniff her hands and become familiar with her presence. Slowly, the stallion began to lower his head, a small sign of trust. She learned to read his moods, understanding when he was nervous, when he was playful, and when he was ready to follow her lead. Each day, she felt a growing bond. She realized that riding him would not be about controlling him, but about working with him. She needed patience, understanding, and respect, qualities she had cultivated through her own journey of recovery. She understood now that fear could not be met with force, and that strength could come from gentleness. The more she learned about the stallion, the more she believed that one day she could ride him successfully. Her parents watched from a distance, torn between worry and pride. They saw the determination in her eyes, the quiet confidence that had grown from months of practice. They saw the bond she was forming with a horse that many had feared. And though they were nervous, they could not deny the courage and persistence their daughter had shown since the day of her accident. She had transformed her life with patience, strength, and a refusal to give up on her dreams. By the end of the first part of her journey, she was no longer just a girl who had been paralyzed. She was a girl who had faced fear, learned patience, built trust, and discovered a new way to move freely in the world. She had begun to reclaim a piece of the life she thought she had lost. And she knew deep in her heart that the wild stallion at the end of the paddock would soon see the strength and courage that matched his own. She was ready to take the next step. The first time she got close to the wild stallion, her heart raced like never before. He was taller than any horse she had ever seen, with a dark, glossy coat that shone in the sunlight and muscles that moved like coiled springs. Every step he took made the ground tremble slightly, and his eyes glimmered with fire and intelligence. He had thrown every rider who had tried to tame him, and people at the stables warned her constantly. But she could not turn away. Her parents and the instructor stayed close, guiding her wheelchair to the edge of the paddock. The girl took a deep breath and wheeled herself closer to the stallion. He watched her with wary eyes, shifting his weight from one hoof to another. She did not speak at first. She simply stayed still, letting him see her, letting him get used to her presence. She could feel her own heart beating fast, but she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that animals, especially horses, could sense fear and hesitation, and she did not want him to sense either from her. She held out her hand slowly, palm open, letting him sniff her fingers. The stallion's nostrils flared as he sniffed, and for a moment he stepped back, unsure of her. But she stayed still, her eyes soft, her breathing steady. Slowly he stepped closer again, lowering his head just a little, testing her patience as she had been testing his. That small gesture was enough to make her smile. It was the first sign that he might trust her. The instructor spoke quietly, reminding her not to rush. He will only respond if you let him come to you. Never try to force him." The girl nodded, understanding completely. She had spent months learning patience with the gentle horse, but this was different. This stallion had a wild spirit. He could not be tamed with routine or comfort. He would need to choose her as much as she chose him. Days passed, and she returned to the paddock again and again. Every visit was a test of her patience and courage. Some days the stallion would ignore her completely, tossing his head and moving away. Some days he would allow her to sit near him, brushing his nose gently with her hand. Every small interaction felt like a victory. She began to notice the details of his behavior, the twitch of an ear, the way his tail swished, the rhythm of his breathing. Slowly she started to understand him, and he started to understand her. One afternoon she decided to try something new. She had seen riders use ropes and training tools, but she wanted to start with trust alone. She wheeled herself alongside the stallion as he walked around the paddock. She mirrored his movements, leaning forward slightly when he leaned, letting him see that she could follow without fear. At first he tossed his head and pranced away, but she stayed close, gently encouraging him with her presence alone. After several minutes he slowed down, walked beside her, and allowed her hand to rest lightly on his mane. Her heart leapt. This was more than a step forward. It was a bridge being built between two spirits. Her parents watched, holding their breath. They could see the careful connection forming, a quiet bond built on patience, respect, and understanding. They knew how dangerous he could be, but they also saw that she had something remarkable, something no one had expected. She had a way of approaching him that was gentle, confident, and fearless at the same time. It was as if she had learned a language that only wild hearts could understand. Over the next few weeks, the girl and the stallion spent hours together every day. She would feed him treats from her hand, let him brush against her arms, and even talk to him in a soft voice. She learned that he responded not just to her touch, but to the way she moved, the rhythm of her breathing, and the calm energy she carried. On the days when she felt frustrated or tired, he could sense it, stepping back or tossing his head. But when she remained steady, even when her muscles ached or her arms trembled, he stayed calm too. They were learning each other slowly, wordlessly, heart to heart. The instructors began to notice progress. They had not expected much at first, thinking the wild stallion's spirit might be too much for anyone, let alone a young girl with limited mobility. But they saw how he responded to her, how he adjusted his steps to match her movements, how he seemed to wait for her signals instead of running ahead. They realized that this was more than just training. It was a connection that could not be forced. One morning, she tried a small experiment. The instructor helped her lift herself slightly above the saddle with the special platform they had designed, without fully riding yet. The stallion was curious, moving closer, lowering his head as if to greet her. She extended her hand slowly, letting him feel her presence. For a few seconds, they simply stayed still, looking at each other. Then, as if sensing her courage and trust, the stallion took a step forward. The girl felt the slight movement beneath her hands and body, and a smile spread across her face. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a real connection, a step closer to her dream. Her parents teared up quietly as they watched. They knew that this was more than riding. This was a triumph over fear, over doubt, over limitations. She had not only survived her accident, but had built a spirit strong enough to face a creature that others feared. They felt pride, love, and awe all at once, realizing that their daughter's determination had unlocked something extraordinary. The girl did not let excitement make her reckless. She knew this was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, she practiced more, learning to balance herself using her arms and upper body, understanding how to signal the stallion with the slightest movements. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when the stallion tossed his head, pranced, or refused to move. She fell back into the wheelchair many times, her arms sore, her skin bruised, but she never gave up. She learned to stand up again, to approach him calmly, and to wait for his trust rather than demand it. She also learned to read the subtle signs of his mood, a flick of his ear, the set of his neck, the position of his tail. All of these told her when he was ready to follow her guidance or when he needed space. This understanding became a language between them, a silent conversation that needed no words. She realized that the wild stallion was not just strong and untamed. He was intelligent, sensitive, and capable of incredible loyalty if treated with respect. Her confidence grew with each small success. She began to imagine what it would be like to ride him fully, to feel him move beneath her in perfect harmony. That dream, which had seemed impossible after her accident, now felt within reach. But she remained patient. She knew that rushing could ruin the bond they had built. The wild stallion required time, understanding, and unwavering calmness. She had learned that patience was as powerful as courage, and she was ready to practice both endlessly. One evening, as the sun began to set over the stables, she wheeled herself to the edge of the paddock and watched the stallion graze. She reached out and he lowered his head toward her hand. She smiled, feeling a quiet joy. She whispered softly, "I'll ride you someday. I promise, but only when you're ready." He stood still as if understanding and nuzzled her hand gently. In that moment, she felt a surge of hope and determination. They had taken the first real step toward a dream that no one else thought possible. Her parents stayed nearby, their hearts full. They knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, that there would be setbacks, falls, and moments of fear. But they also knew something more important. They knew their daughter had a spirit that would not quit. She had faced tragedy, adapted, and built something extraordinary from patience, trust, and courage. That evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and gold, they watched her and the stallion together and realized that they were witnessing the beginning of something beautiful and unforgettable. The girl left the paddock that evening with a sense of accomplishment. Every day she had faced fear, taken risks, and learned to trust not only the stallion but herself. She had learned that courage was not about being fearless. It was about moving forward even when fear was present. She had learned that strength came from persistence, patience, and the willingness to connect deeply with another being. And most of all, she had learned that her dreams were not bound by her physical limitations. They were bound only by her determination and heart. She slept that night with visions of the stallion moving alongside her, feeling the rhythm of his steps and the trust in his eyes. She knew that the next stage of their journey would be even more challenging, that it would require every ounce of skill, balance, and courage she had cultivated. But she also knew that she was ready. The wild stallion had begun to recognize her as someone special, someone worthy of his trust. And she had begun to see herself not as a girl limited by her body, but as a rider who could one day soar alongside the most untamed spirit she had ever met. That night, she dreamed not of falling or failing, but of harmony, trust, and freedom. She dreamed of the day when she would finally ride fully into the arena, the wind in her hair, the stallion beneath her, and the crowd watching in awe. She knew that moment was still ahead, but for the first time she could see it clearly, and it filled her heart with joy, hope, and unshakable determination. The next morning, she arrived at the stables with the same excitement and nerves that had become familiar by now. She knew that today would be different. Today, she would not just stand near the stallion or walk alongside him. Today, she would attempt something closer to what she had dreamed of for so long, sitting on his back even if only with support. Her parents and the instructor stayed nearby, ready to help, but they also trusted her judgment. They could see how patient and careful she had become, and how deeply she had bonded with the stallion. The stallion was already waiting when she wheeled into the paddock. His dark eyes followed her, and he tossed his head slightly, his muscles rippling under his sleek coat. She smiled at him softly, speaking in the low, calm voice she had learned always helped. "Good morning," she whispered. "Are you ready today?" He stepped closer, lowering his head to nuzzle her hand. That simple gesture made her heart swell. He was ready, or at least willing to try, and that was all she needed. Her instructor wheeled her over to the mounting platform. They had spent weeks designing it to ensure that she could lift herself safely, with minimal risk, and that the stallion would stay calm during the process. She carefully positioned herself, resting her hands on the horse's strong neck for balance. Clover, the gentle horse she had ridden before, had prepared her for this, but this was different. This horse was wild, unpredictable, and strong. She could feel her pulse quicken as she steadied herself. The first attempt was tense. She lifted herself slowly, leaning on the platform in the instructor's steady hands. The stallion shifted slightly beneath her, testing her balance, and she felt a rush of fear. Her arms trembled, but she forced herself to breathe deeply. She had practiced this countless times in her mind, visualizing the movement, the balance, and the trust between them. Step by step, she eased herself onto the saddle. When she finally settled, she could feel the stallion beneath her, strong and alive, his body waiting to respond to her touch. The instructor and her parents stayed close, ready to intervene, but she waved them to wait. She wanted this to be her moment, not theirs. She lifted her hand slightly, gripping the reins loosely, letting the stallion sense her intentions without feeling forced. For several minutes they stayed still together, just breathing, feeling the connection that had grown over weeks of patience. Then slowly the stallion shifted his weight and began to move forward. The first steps were slow and careful, and her arms ached from holding herself steady, but a smile spread across her face. She was riding him. The feeling was indescribable. She'd imagined it for years, dreamed of it in her mind countless times, and now it was real. The stallion moved with grace, sensing her weight, following her subtle shifts and signals. He was wild, yes, but he was listening to her, responding to her without needing force or commands. She realized that riding him was not about control. It was about understanding, patience, and communication. Every movement was a conversation, every step a question and answer between them. Over the next few sessions, she practiced the same routine. Sometimes the stallion would test her, tossing his head, speeding up unexpectedly, or stopping in defiance. She fell back into the wheelchair more than once, her hands scraped and sore, but she never gave up. Each fall was a lesson, each moment of struggle a reminder that trust had to be earned every single day. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the stallion began to respond more readily, following her guidance with fewer tests and more confidence. Her confidence grew too. She learned to anticipate his movements, to adjust her balance before he made sudden changes, and to reward him with gentle touches and soft words. She discovered that the more she stayed calm and patient, the more the stallion remained calm and responsive. The bond between them deepened with every ride, a partnership built on mutual respect. She began to feel something she had never felt since her accident, a true sense of freedom. One afternoon, her instructor suggested a small challenge. They would let the stallion move freely in a larger area while she rode, giving her the chance to guide him with only her body and subtle rein movements. The girl felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was uncharted territory. The stallion had never been allowed such freedom with a rider, and she knew it could be risky. But she also knew that this step was necessary if she wanted to reach her ultimate dream, the arena, the crowd, and the full ride she had imagined for so long. With careful guidance, they wheeled her to the center of the large paddock. The stallion eyed the open space warily at first, then lowered his head and began walking. She followed his rhythm, leaning slightly, letting her weight communicate direction. At first he moved cautiously, stopping and testing her balance. But when she remained calm and steady, he began to pick up speed, walking in longer strides, his powerful legs carrying them forward. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was no longer riding slowly in a circle. She was moving with him in harmony as one. That day she learned the true power of trust. The stallion tested her several times, bucking or sidestepping, but she stayed focused, breathing and using every skill she had learned. By the end of the session, she could guide him confidently around the paddock, feeling a bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than pain. Her parents hugged her tightly as she wheeled off the platform, tears in their eyes. They knew that she had crossed a threshold today, one that few people ever reached with such a wild and spirited horse. The days turned into weeks, and the girl and the stallion became almost inseparable at the stables. She learned to read his moods, anticipate his reactions, and guide him with only the lightest touch. They practiced different maneuvers, from gentle turns to slow trots, always staying patient, always listening. The instructor marveled at the progress. What had seemed impossible a few months ago was now becoming a reality. The wild stallion was responding to her, not as a rider who commanded him, but as a partner who understood him. Her dreams grew bigger with every ride. She imagined the arena, the crowd, and the moment when she would finally ride freely, not just for herself, but to show everyone that courage, patience, and determination could overcome the impossible. But she also knew that they were not there yet. There would be more challenges, moments of fear, uncertainty, and testing that would push her and the stallion to their limits. She was ready to face them all. One evening, as she wheeled herself away from the paddock, she paused to look back at the stallion. The sun was setting, casting golden light across his sleek coat. He looked at her with dark, intelligent eyes, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. She reached out her hand and he lowered his head to touch it gently. In that quiet moment, she felt a surge of hope and determination. They were ready for the next step, whatever it might be. Her parents walked beside her, their hands warm on her shoulders. They knew that their daughter had grown stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. They had watched her face fear, fall, rise, and learn to communicate with a creature many considered untamable. They had seen her spirit shine through, and they knew that the story they were witnessing was one of courage, patience, and the extraordinary bond between a girl and a wild stallion. Over the next few sessions, the girl began to experiment with more advanced movements. She practiced guiding him in gentle circles, maintaining balance during slight trots and communicating with subtle shifts of her body. Each attempt was a learning experience. Sometimes the stallion resisted, tossing his head or sidestepping, but she never lost patience. Every small success built their connection stronger. She felt a growing sense of pride, not just in her own abilities, but in the trust and respect that had formed between them. Her instructor encouraged her to visualize the arena, to imagine the moment when she would finally ride in front of a crowd. Picture it in your mind, the instructor said. Feel the excitement, the joy, and the connection with the horse. The more real it feels in your mind, the easier it will be in reality. The girl closed her eyes during her sessions, imagining the arena, the audience, and the wild stallion moving beneath her with grace and power. Each day the image became more vivid, more alive, and more achievable. By the end of this part of her journey, she could mount the stallion with confidence, guide him through controlled movements, and communicate effectively with subtle cues. She was no longer just a girl learning to ride. She was a rider in harmony with a horse whose spirit matched her own. They had become partners, each responding to the other with trust, patience, and understanding. The impossible had begun to feel possible. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the journey so far. She had faced fear, adapted to her limitations, and learned to trust a creature that many had considered untamable. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. And she had realized that the bond between a rider and a horse could transcend physical limitations, creating a connection that was stronger than anything else. She dreamed again of the arena, of the crowd, and of the moment when she would finally ride the wild stallion freely, showing the world what trust, patience, and determination could achieve. She knew that the next steps would be the hardest yet, the preparation for the big day, but the day of the arena finally arrived, and the girl could hardly believe it. Months of preparation, patience, and practice had led to this moment. Her heart pounded with excitement and nerves as she wheeled toward the stables. Today she would ride the wild stallion in front of a crowd for the very first time. The audience had been invited by the equestrian center, family, friends, and local supporters who had followed her journey and wanted to witness the incredible bond she had built with the horse. Her parents and instructor stayed close, helping her with the adaptive saddle and double-checking every strap and harness. The stallion, as if sensing the importance of the day, stood calmly, his dark eyes following her every move. He had always been independent, wild in spirit, but today he seemed to recognize her determination and courage. He lowered his head slightly as she approached, and she felt a rush of calm wash over her. The months of practice, the countless hours of patience and trust building, had led them to this point. The audience began to gather around the arena. Soft whispers filled the air, mixed with the occasional cheer from those who had come to support her. The girl could hear the excitement and curiosity in their voices. Many wondered if a girl in a wheelchair could truly ride a wild stallion, if the horse would even allow her to mount safely, but she did not let their doubt affect her. She had spent months learning to communicate with him, to understand his moods, and to guide him with gentleness and patience. Today, that bond would be put to the test. With the instructor's help, she wheeled herself to the mounting platform. The stallion watched her carefully, muscles tense, but he did not resist. She took a deep breath and lifted herself onto the saddle, feeling the familiar strength of the horse beneath her. Her hands gripped the reins lightly, and she whispered to him in a soft, calm voice. "We're ready," she said. "Let's do this together." He shifted his weight slightly in response, as if acknowledging her words. The audience fell silent as she guided the stallion to the center of the arena. Every step was deliberate, controlled, and graceful. She could feel his power beneath her, each muscle moving in perfect rhythm with her guidance. She had practiced this countless times in the paddock, but the energy of the crowd added a new level of intensity. The stallion sensed it too. He moved carefully at first, testing the ground, the sounds, and the excitement in the air. But she remained calm, steady, and patient. letting him feel her confidence and trust. As she guided him through the first few circles, she noticed the expressions of the audience changing. Eyes widened in amazement. People whispered to each other, pointing out how the girl, despite her physical limitations, was riding the horse with skill and grace. Some had tears in their eyes, unable to believe what they were witnessing. She smiled softly, focusing not on the crowd but on the stallion beneath her. They were partners, and their connection was what mattered most. The instructor had instructed her to start with slow movements, allowing the stallion to adjust to the arena. But the girl felt ready for more. She leaned slightly, signaling him to pick up the pace. The stallion responded, moving into a smooth trot, powerful yet controlled. The audience gasped softly as they realized the horse was responding entirely to her guidance. She could feel the rhythm beneath her, the coordination of their movements, and the trust that had been built over months of careful practice. The crowd began to clap softly, encouraging her without breaking the quiet connection she shared with the horse. She guided him in gentle turns, maintaining balance and control, her hands light on the reins. The stallion's movements were strong and graceful, yet he remained perfectly in tune with her subtle commands. Every trot, every shift of weight, every gentle nudge of the reins was a conversation between them, a testament to their trust and understanding. At one point, the stallion sensed a sudden noise from the crowd, a chair tipping over, a loud gasp from someone nearby. He pranced and shifted nervously. Many horses would have panicked in that moment, but she stayed calm. Her voice was soft, her hands steady, and she leaned slightly to reassure him. Slowly he relaxed, responding to her calm energy, and resumed his smooth trot. She could feel the audience holding their breath, and she realized that they were witnessing not just a ride, but the power of patience, trust, and determination. She guided him through a series of gentle spins and turns, movements they had practiced countless times in the paddock. The stallion followed her perfectly, responding to the lightest cues of her body. Every successful maneuver filled her with a quiet joy. She could feel the power of the horse beneath her, the strength in his muscles and the intelligence in his eyes. This was not just a demonstration of skill, it was a shared triumph, a celebration of the bond they had built. The audience began to cheer, softly at first, then louder as they realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Some had tears streaming down their faces. They had come expecting to see a brave girl attempt something daring, but they were seeing far more than that. They were seeing a miracle born of trust, patience, and courage. The girl smiled softly, focusing on the stallion, not the applause. He was her partner, her companion, and together, they were accomplishing something extraordinary. As the session continued, she encouraged him to trot faster, feeling the surge of power beneath her. He responded beautifully, moving with energy and grace, yet remaining in perfect harmony with her guidance. The arena seemed to shrink around them, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. It was just her and the stallion moving together as one. The joy she felt was overwhelming. Every fall, every struggle, every moment of doubt that had come since her accident had led to this. She was riding the wild stallion, and they were in perfect sync. Her parents watched from the side, holding hands tightly, their hearts full of pride and love. They had supported her through every challenge, every fall, every moment of fear, and now they saw the incredible result. Their daughter riding a horse that had once seemed untamable, moving with confidence, courage, and grace. Tears streamed down their faces as they realized the depth of her achievement. She had not only achieved her dream, but she had also inspired everyone who was watching. The instructor smiled, stepping back to let them continue. She had been guiding the girl for months, but now it was clear that the bond was beyond instruction. It was instinctive, natural, and powerful. The girl had learned to communicate with the stallion in a way that few riders could, relying on trust, patience, and subtle guidance rather than force. Together they created a performance that was both beautiful and emotional, a story of determination and connection that needed no words. After several more minutes of careful trotting, gentle turns, and subtle spins, the girl guided the stallion to the center of the arena. She leaned slightly forward, signaling him to slow down and stop. He responded immediately, lowering his head gently and standing still beneath her. For a moment they remained perfectly still, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. The audience erupted into applause, standing and cheering, tears flowing freely. They had witnessed something remarkable, a young girl who had faced immense challenges, riding a horse that had once been considered untamable, moving in perfect harmony and trust. The girl smiled, patting the stallion gently. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." He nuzzled her hand in response, a silent affirmation of their bond. The applause continued, filling the arena with warmth, joy, and admiration. People clapped not just for her skill, but for her courage, perseverance, and the remarkable connection she had built with the stallion. As the ride came to an end, she guided him carefully to the edge of the arena and dismounted with the help of the platform. Her arms were tired, her hands sore, but her heart was full. She wheeled herself toward her parents, who embraced her tightly, tears of pride streaming down their faces. They whispered words of love, encouragement, and awe, knowing that she had achieved something extraordinary. The audience continued to cheer, some stepping forward to congratulate her, others simply standing in quiet admiration. Many people spoke of the inspiration they had witnessed, the courage to face fear, the patience to build trust, and the determination to pursue a dream against all odds. The girl smiled softly, grateful for the support, but most of all grateful for the bond she had formed with the stallion. It was that connection, built over months of effort, that had made this moment possible. As she left the arena, she looked back at the stallion, who stood quietly, his eyes following her. She knew that this was not the end, but a milestone in their journey together. There would be more rides, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. But today was a triumph, a proof that determination, patience, and trust could overcome even the most impossible obstacles. That evening, as she rested at home, she reflected on the journey so far. She had faced fear, adapted to her limitations, and learned to communicate with a creature that many had considered untamable. She had discovered the true meaning of courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. And she had realized that dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, could be achieved with patience, trust, and heart. She fell asleep that night with visions of the arena, the crowd and the stallion beneath her, moving in perfect. The day after the arena ride, the girl woke up with a feeling she had never experienced before. Pride, joy, and a quiet, steady confidence filled her heart. She knew she had achieved something extraordinary, not just riding the wild stallion, but proving to herself and everyone around her that limits existed only in the mind. She moved through her morning routine with a sense of calm determination, knowing that the journey was far from over. Riding in the arena had been a milestone, but it was also a beginning. Her parents and the instructor were already at the stables when she arrived. The stallion was waiting, calm and alert, as if he too had understood that something had shifted between them. The ride yesterday had solidified their connection, and now it was time to continue building that trust, learning new movements, and refining the skills she had worked so hard to master. She approached him slowly, letting him see her, speaking in the soft, reassuring voice that had become a language between them. Over the following weeks, she began practicing longer rides, gradually introducing new maneuvers. She worked on controlling the stallion at faster paces, guiding him through turns and maintaining perfect balance while trotting. Each session was challenging, requiring strength, focus, and patience, but she faced it with a quiet determination. The stallion responded beautifully, moving with power and grace, yet always in tune with her subtle cues. Their connection was no longer just visible, it was undeniable. One afternoon, the instructor suggested trying a small jump. It was nothing high, just a gentle obstacle, but it was an entirely new challenge. The girl felt her heart race at the thought. She had never jumped with a horse before, and the idea of doing so with a stallion as strong and spirited as this one was terrifying. Yet she also felt a spark of excitement. She had faced fear before and had always come out stronger. She nodded, determined to try. With careful guidance, she guided the stallion to the jump. She leaned slightly forward, signaling him to move with her. For a moment, he hesitated, sensing the change in the terrain. She whispered softly, encouraging him with calm words and gentle touches. Then together they lifted over the small obstacle. Her heart soared with exhilaration. It was not just a jump. It was proof that they could tackle challenges together, that trust and courage could overcome even the most intimidating moments. The practice continued, each day building her confidence and strengthening her bond with the stallion. She learned to anticipate his movements, to guide him with subtle shifts in weight, and to communicate entirely through touch, posture, and presence. She discovered that the wild stallion was not only powerful and spirited, but also intelligent and deeply attuned to her emotions. He responded to her joy, her patience, and even her moments of doubt, adjusting his movements in perfect harmony. As the weeks passed, the girl began to feel a sense of freedom she had never known since her accident. Riding the stallion was not just a physical experience. It was emotional and spiritual. She felt alive in a way she had not felt in years, connected to the earth, the horse, and the possibilities of life. Each ride was a reminder that determination, patience, and trust could create something beautiful and extraordinary. Word of her accomplishments began to spread. Friends, neighbors, and supporters from the community came to watch her practice. They marveled at the sight of a girl in a wheelchair guiding a wild stallion with such skill and grace. Many of them had doubts at first, but they could not deny what they were witnessing. It was not just a performance, it was an inspiration, a lesson in courage, persistence, and the power of the human spirit. Her parents watched her with pride, remembering the months of struggle, fear, and determination that had brought her to this point. They had seen her fall countless times, face frustration, and overcome every obstacle with patience and resilience. Now they watched her move with confidence and skill, riding a horse that had once been untamable. Tears filled their eyes, but they were tears of joy and admiration. Their daughter had accomplished something remarkable, and it was a testament to her strength and character. One day, during a particularly long ride, the girl guided the stallion through a series of turns, trotting at a steady pace. Feeling the rhythm of his movements beneath her, she realized that she had reached a point where fear no longer dictated her actions. She trusted the stallion completely, and he trusted her. Together they moved as one, communicating silently, anticipating each other's next steps. It was a moment of perfect harmony, a culmination of months of patience, practice, and trust. The instructor suggested taking their training to the next level, a public demonstration for the community. The girl hesitated for a moment, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The thought of performing in front of more people, of showing the stallion and herself in a larger setting, was daunting. But she also knew that this was an opportunity to inspire others, to show that courage and determination could overcome fear and limitations. She agreed, feeling a quiet determination settle over her. The day of the public demonstration arrived. The arena was filled with people, their eyes wide with curiosity and anticipation. The girl felt the familiar rush of nerves, but she also felt a sense of calm. She knew the stallion, she knew herself, and she trusted the bond they had built. She wheeled toward him slowly, letting him see her, whispering softly to keep him calm. He lowered his head slightly, nuzzling her hand, a sign of trust and readiness. With the instructor's help, she mounted the saddle. The crowd fell silent as she guided the stallion to the center of the arena. Every movement was deliberate and controlled, every subtle shift of her weight communicating direction and intention. The audience watched in awe as the girl and the stallion moved together, a seamless partnership of trust and courage. They trotted, spun, and navigated gentle obstacles, each action showcasing the bond they had developed over months of practice. Tears filled many eyes in the audience. They were not just witnessing a demonstration. They were witnessing a story of triumph over adversity, a lesson in patience, perseverance, and the power of belief. People whispered to each other about the girl's courage, the stallion's spirit, and the extraordinary connection between them. Every observer could feel the emotion in the arena, the silent communication between rider and horse, and the proof that limitations could be overcome with determination and trust. After several minutes, the girl guided the stallion to a slow stop at the center of the arena. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his neck for a brief moment, feeling his warmth and strength. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, some crying, all moved by what they had seen. The girl smiled, her heart full. She knew that this was more than a demonstration of skill. It was a demonstration of courage, trust, and the extraordinary potential of the human spirit. Her parents rushed to her side as she dismounted with the help of the platform. They embraced her tightly, their hearts overflowing with pride and love. "You did it," her mother whispered. "You really did it," her father nodded, tears in his eyes. "We always knew you could," he said softly. "You never gave up, and look at what you've accomplished." The girl smiled, feeling the warmth and love of her family, knowing that their support had been a vital part of her journey. The stallion nuzzled her hand gently, his eyes reflecting trust and understanding. She had built something extraordinary with him, a connection that transcended fear, limitations, and the expectations of others. He was more than a horse now. He was a companion, a partner, and a reflection of her own courage and determination. Every moment spent together had strengthened that bond, and every ride had proven that trust, patience, and persistence could create miracles. In the days that followed, the girl continued to ride, refining her skills and exploring new challenges. She and the stallion moved with confidence and grace, a partnership built on trust, patience, and understanding. People continued to come to watch, inspired by what they saw. Many were moved to tears, not just by the skill, but by the story of perseverance and courage that the girl embodied. She had become a symbol of hope, determination, and the extraordinary potential of the human spirit. She reflected on her journey often, remembering the moments of fear, frustration, and doubt that had led to this point. She remembered the nights spent crying, the falls, and the countless hours of practice. She remembered the moments when the stallion had refused to cooperate, testing her patience and resolve. And she realized that every challenge, every setback, had been a part of her story, a story that had shaped her, strengthened her, and led to this incredible moment of triumph. Her parents continued to support her, always amazed by her resilience and determination. They had seen the girl who had been paralyzed, the girl who had faced fear and limitations, grow into a rider capable of riding a wild stallion with grace and skill. They had witnessed her courage, patience, and the unbreakable bond she had formed with the horse, and they knew that her story would inspire countless others, showing that determination and heart could overcome even the greatest obstacles. One evening, as the sun set over the stables, the girl sat beside the stallion, brushing his coat gently. She whispered to him softly, thanking him for his trust, patience, and partnership. He nuzzled her hand in response, a silent affirmation of their bond. "Is it Zako?"